1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We're just going to put some water here.
So have we got Don's talk on here?
Yes, Don's talk is all on there.
Right.
I haven't started it yet, but it's just on
we're mirrored, aren't we? So we don't want to start it until we're ready
no,
to go.
and it's just a folder on the desktop called MOOC event in which it is. You can minimise this to see, but I can do that while you introduce him if you like.
Okay,
it's
MOOC
just
event
in there,
okay.
And it's just his presentation in there. So is that all right? Great. In that case, shall we get started?
Over to you.
Thank
You're the boss.
Good morning. Elizabeth Lately. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention and ask you to take a seat. My name is Mara Deepwell. I'm the Chief Executive of the Association for Learning Technology, and I've got the privilege to have the first welcome this morning. I'm going to very shortly hand you over to Professor Hugh Davies, but before then, I'd just like to say a very warm welcome to you all. This is the first event of the MOOC Special Interest Group, which was only launched in early September at our annual conference. And we're really excited to see such a high profile of speakers. I think there's going to be a lot of activity on social media with the DigiChamps, particularly in the corner over there. If you want to wave, hello DigiChamps. So lots of tweeting will be going on. I think also on Weibo in Chinese, so in case English isn't your first language and you prefer Chinese, you can still follow the event. I think this is a first. Also, I would like to thank the University of Southampton, and particularly Don Nutbeam, for hosting us so kindly here today. And I'd also like to thank Fiona Strawbridge and her fellow officers at the MOOC for organising this event, which has been pretty much like a dream. I hope the day itself is going to go as well as the run-up. But now, one more further announcement, which is housekeeping. We have had a fire drill already this morning. That was a test. In case there is another fire drill, that will not be a test. And I'd like to point out that the nearest fire exit is here, so please follow the evacuation signs, and we'll also be on hand to help you in case of emergency. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Professor Hugh Davies, Director of CITE, the Centre for Innovation for Technology in Learning.
Technologies and education, it'll do.
Sorry.
And education.
Long title. But Hugh will introduce today and our speakers, so thank you very much.
Oh, loudspeaker as well, right, okay. Hello everyone, welcome. Actually, the person who's organised all this is Fiona, who's just tried to escape at the back, Fiona Harvey, and in a hideous example of reverse delegation, she asked me to chair this morning, so here I am. And it's going to be my privilege to introduce Don Nutbeam, Vice Chancellor at Southampton, University of Southampton, and the bios are all in there. You may spot a touch of the Australian accent from his time in Australia. But I think the thing I'd like to say about Don is that when the kind of MOOC movement started getting going, Don enthusiastically embraced it and said to us, come on, we can embrace this as a university. There was a certain amount of kind of initial cynicism, but then he held a meeting to kind of talk to people about it. And we chose a reasonably large lecture theatre. It was packed with people who thought it'd be fun to do a MOOC. And that enthusiasm has really pervaded the university since. And that's been a really good part about working on MOOCs. It's been an opportunity for us to really embrace kind of online education in a way that we've been able to before. So without ado, I will ask Don to come to the podium and present to us. Shall I get your oh, it's up, yes.
All right. Shall I use the microphone?
We
Can I just sit or stand, depending on what you
Oh,
prefer?
I probably prefer to stand actually.
There appears to be a slide.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you.
Doesn't seem to be working at the moment. Now it's turned on, it should work.
Right. Okay. Well, good morning, and I should say welcome to the University of Southampton. Speaking as someone who spent 20 years in Australia, I can say this is one of our sunnier, brighter days. The weather's always lovely here. I'm sure the sun will be shining before we finished this morning's session. It's a real pleasure to be with you this morning. As Hugh said, I've been fascinated by what Hugh referred to as the MOOC movement. It feels like that occasionally. In fact, my first conversations about MOOCs were probably about 18 months ago when I spent some concentrated time in the company of the Vice-Chancellor of the Open University, Martin Bean, who introduced me to the language of MOOCs and shared with me his enthusiastic understanding of their great potential, both as a force in education and as a disruptive force in education. And from those conversations, as I say, not so long ago, has emerged Martin's grand idea for FutureLearn. You'll be hearing more about that later. And an enthusiastic group of British universities who've teamed up with FutureLearn to launch in just the last few weeks the UK's first MOOCs. Now I'm going to offer you a perspective. If you've read my bio, I have absolutely no background in this at all. My perspective is that of a university vice-chancellor, interested in the education of our students and the future of the university and the place that MOOCs might have in that future. So I've posed a question that's been put to me certainly as a statement at several times over the last year. Is this the end of the campus, or as a statement, this is the end of the campus university? I'm not so sure, as you'll hear from my presentation this morning, but it is a perfectly valid question to ask. So this is a photo taken just out front of the building that we're currently in. There's certain symbolism attached to this, which I will refer to a bit later, but the two buildings you can see are one of our oldest, classic, red brick library, housing a fantastic collection of books, fewer periodicals these days, fantastic special collections. Contains all the papers of the Duke of Wellington and Lord Palmerston. Most recently, we've inherited the Mountbatten papers. A fantastic learning resource at the heart of the university. And on the left, as you see it, our newest building opened for use just 2 years ago. It's a fantastic life sciences building, home to our biological sciences, medical sciences, and increasingly home to some pretty fantastic interdisciplinary research and learning. And I chose the picture, as I said, for quite symbolic reasons, which I will come back to eventually. Now, Martin Bean, in one of his wilder and more enthusiastic moments, said to me, "The future is clicks, not bricks." There will be no campus in the future. Students can study what they like, where they like, when they like, through the medium of the internet, basically. And again, I put the big cross on our lovely red brick building, which you can all go and inspect later. So is it the end of the campus as we know it? Well, certainly if you believe some of the slightly more excited, in my opinion, rather overhyped papers and reports that have been written in the last year. And I'm sure some of you will be familiar with these. I've forgotten the name of it. I'm afraid I forget them easily, but it was a report by the Pearson Group, no vested interest there, of course, called The Avalanche is Coming. Again, Martin, who does get very excited, Martin Bean referred to this as education's Napster moment, this highly disruptive moment in university education. And the logic is actually quite compelling. If university content is available for free or nearly for free, you have access to the internet of course, who's going to pay £9,000 plus a year for university education? If content can be delivered when and wherever people want it, who's going to turn up at lectures like this ever again? The conclusion is obvious. I used this slide, by the way, in a presentation a few months back, and the Times reported it directly as a quote from me, that we should MOOC or die, warns Vice Chancellor. Actually, this is a quote from somebody else. But nonetheless, I certainly engaged with the spirit of MOOCs. As Hugh has said, I've been a pretty enthusiastic supporter of this university's engagement with FutureLearn, and I have to say, very responsive to what I've discovered to be overwhelming interest and enthusiasm among the university academic community for the creation of more accessible online learning resources. And if you believe the Pearson report, neither quality nor reputation can stop this avalanche of change, this disruptive moment in higher education. Well, honestly, I don't know if any of it's true, and I'd be surprised if anyone here really felt confident enough to predict quite how things will shape up, whether this will disrupt higher education, campus education, in the same way that the music industry and the book industry has been completely disrupted as a consequence of technological change. I'm not sure, I don't know, but I certainly felt that this was important enough as a change in higher education. The universities like Southampton to want to embrace it and use it in ways that we felt were compatible with what we're trying to achieve as a university. And there are a lot of opportunities for those of open mind and a willingness to embrace the change. For example, one of the rather deliberate approaches that we've taken to creating our first few MOOCs is that we're concentrating on what we do best, what we're world renowned for. We are entering a highly competitive market space for educational content, and we felt that strategically what we needed to do was to make sure that we positioned ourselves in spaces where we know we're world leading, and we have something to say that students from around the world would be interested to hear. And our first two MOOCs may not be a surprise to you if you know anything about the university, are a MOOC on Web Science, which is going live
on Monday.
Starts on Monday, and just announced in the last couple of days while I was overseas in New York, our second MOOC, Oceanography. The last exchange I saw, Hugh, was that we were capped at 10,000 students for the Web Science MOOC, but you were applying for an extension.
That sort of thing, yes.
Yes. Okay, fine. But certainly, as far as I'm aware, we have the maximum number of students, 10,000 students signed up already to commence our Web Science MOOC on Monday. So it does give you some idea of the interest and enthusiasm for this style of learning around the world. We don't really yet know much about the profile of those who signed up, I don't think.
We've got a bit, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, tell us. I mean, let's make this interactive. What do we know?
No, as usual, we've got the ones who are coming in through the media in advance, and they're very enthusiastic, experienced learners.
Right. Very good. Excellent. Half of them are University of Southampton staff, I should say. So why are we embracing MOOCs? Well, first and foremost, this is an opportunity for the University of Southampton to show the world what it can do, and what we're good at, why you might be interested to become a student, become a member of staff at the University of Southampton. We're good at web science and oceanography. We are world leading in those discipline areas, and progressively it's our intention over the year and coming years to bring online programs where we feel we've got something to say that is internationally competitive. It's very good, if you'll forgive me for being so commercial about this, but I did say to you I'd speak as a Vice-Chancellor, it's good marketing for the university. We can bring to tens of thousands of potential students the opportunities that exist, the attention of students around the world, the opportunities that exist at the University of Southampton. It's good for us in terms of raising our international profile. It may well, although this is completely unproven, but it may well create new markets for us for learning that eventually may translate into fee-paying students. We just don't know, but we are experimenting as we go along, as are most of the universities and organisations that are engaged with MOOCs at the moment. Over time, it's very likely, it seems to me, that MOOCs will have a part to play in continuing professional development. We also, and I have to say this is something that's strongly felt by the academic community of this university, we also see this as part of our public service role as a university. There's no doubt in my mind, Hugh described this extraordinary event that we held probably about 10 months ago, where rather casually, I think I'd have to say, we organised at very short notice a lecture theatre and said, if you're interested in MOOCs, come and hear what Hugh has to say. Frankly, we were breaking the fire regulations on the day, I think, because people were sat in the aisles and were crowded at the back of the lecture theatre because people were interested. They liked the idea of making educational content accessible all around the world to people who might not otherwise have any access to educational content of the standard and quality that we can offer at this university. And the last thing to say is I felt, certainly strategically as a university, that we really did need to embrace MOOCs as an idea, and that over time I suspect most of the leading universities in the world will be offering online content for free, organised courses for students for free. So you'll stand out if you're not engaged in the game. My view, though, I have to say, and one of the reasons why I've personally been so enthusiastic about this as a Vice-Chancellor, is that I think it offers us an unprecedented opportunity to draw through our academic community. It's not drawing through the students into the university as much in the short term as drawing the academic community of the university, in many parts notoriously conservative in its approach to teaching and learning, draw through the academic community to get the community to embrace IT in education much more. And so the point I make on this slide, the first point, is MOOCs and the technologies that they foster, I think, will rapidly advance innovations in teaching and learning, and will, as I've indicated in the previous slide, expand our market education away from the typical 3-year campus-based undergraduate education, but it will expand, not necessarily replace, and I think that's the key word. For me, MOOCs, and again the technologies that will be developed through MOOC platforms, will add to the range of options available for learning on campus and extend access to a wider range of content than is currently the case. In my view, our challenge as a campus-based university over the next few years is how we optimize the campus experience, how we ensure that there is real added value to being on a university campus by, in this case, embracing the digital movement and in particular looking to free up contact time, free up the timetable to be able to concentrate on high added value contact time between university faculty and the student community. In my own view, I don't see this quite as a Napster moment, as such a disruptive moment in higher education, but I do see it as a point of acceleration of an existing process of evolution in campus-based teaching and learning. One question that I think is more legitimate, I don't know that this is the end of the campus, but it could herald the end of a traditional lecture. When I talk to students, I have to say there are genuinely mixed views about this. I rather boldly said at a conference a few months back that how many students really like to be sat in the back row of a 300-400 person lecture, when in fact they could get the same content delivered to them at a time that's convenient, place that's convenient, they can stop and start and go over things. Why? What's the future of the lecture under those circumstances? I got a surprising reaction from some students. Some students agreed immediately and said, I wish all my lectures were available online, that's how I would like them. Others, though, said that the discipline, the structure of coming into a lecture, of being with colleagues, of joining with other students before and after a lecture is as important as the content delivery itself. And if they sit at home in their room and receive a lecture, same content of course, possibly a better and more tailored delivery, but nonetheless miss the interaction in and around the lecture, then they are losing something vital. And it was just a reminder again that it is the human interaction that students are very high value on as a part of campus education. And although, of course, there are ways of reproducing that human interaction online, most of the students that I've talked to about this will argue with me that being in a place is really important to them. Not to everyone, and it's not possible for everyone, but for them it's a real added value, a really important part of their education. So could be the end of the lecture, could be the end of the lecture as we typically use a lecture. So I think you'll be more familiar than I am even with flipped classroom, although I tried this the last time I taught. Made all my material available online in advance, told the students that I expected them to be familiar with it when we started, and we had a great and much more interactive set of discussions going on in the lecture. I really enjoyed it, I must say, and I can see how our faculties will begin to embrace this approach to learning. But importantly, I don't think I'm going to be wanting surgery from someone who trained online. I'm not even that fussed, to be honest, about engineers that do their study entirely online. The truth of the matter is there's a lot of added value that comes from being on a campus through the quality interaction that occurs between faculty and students and between students during their time on campus. And our goal has to be to use online learning, online communication optimally, so that we can use face-to-face interactions optimally. And I think for us that's the challenge as a campus-based university, and I think that's the opportunity that the MOOC revolution offers those of us working in conventional universities. Certainly offers us much more choice and flexibility. I'm just going to flip that back actually, just again because chosen for symbolic value. Every year we run a competition with our student community to design learning spaces, and increasingly now around the campus we have learning spaces that have been designed by and for our students. And this is a whole area of one of our buildings that was redesigned according to a student design, using pod space, highly digitally connected, as you can see, and all about enhancing the quality of the campus and optimising the wired facilities there. So MOOCs on campus, well, it's all in the wrapping. I'm afraid I struggle always to keep up with the ever-changing language that surrounds MOOCs, but I gather wrapping's a new part of that language. Even Hugh looks surprised. I'm very hip-hop and happening here. I've got the language. So the idea here is University of Southampton, my previous university, which was the University of Sydney in Australia. Universities, though, are notoriously reluctant to accept teaching at another university as credit against its own degree programs. So how's that going to play out in the future? I don't know, but I do know that universities have been terribly reluctant up until now to allow the free movement of students between universities and between degree programs. And I pose a very simple question: is it all about the student, or is it all about the institution? And I'm uncertain as to how this is going to play out, but the one thing I am sure about is that this university will be in the game. We will be actively looking and exploring ways in which we can make it as much about the student as it is about the institution, without frankly bankrupting the institution. So how do we make it all work? Well, I think we've still some way to go. There are a lot of issues emerging that frankly we probably don't want too much government involvement in just at the moment. And I have to say, Martin Bean and I have had exactly this conversation with David Willis, the Minister for Science and Universities. David is enthusiastic about the potential of MOOCs, was very supportive of the establishment of Future Learn, but equally adamant that he felt the best thing that government could do at this stage was not do anything. But at some stage down the road, we are going to have to find a way of regulating, of quality assurance, of working through who owns what, because the kind of conundrum that I've just described will emerge quite quickly. I think it's fair to say that the campus of the future, and I believe there is a future for a campus, will be different to the past. The way we design campuses will be different from the past. The types of buildings, the types of space, the type of learning space, the type of social space that we have in campuses of the future will be different to campuses as the past. I've mentioned the point that I think the added value from campus education comes from the wrapper. It's what we do around the content, because the content is going to increasingly be available in a number of attractive forms from a number of attractive places, and it's all about the wrapper. And as I mentioned earlier, it's all about using the technology as it evolves and is being accelerated by the creation of MOOCs for all forms of teaching, particularly campus-based teaching. And my favourite Australian expression, of course, is that universities like my own, like Southampton, have to ride the wave, not get swamped by it, and focus on the things that we're good at. So where does that leave us? Is it the end of the campus? Well, I said that the two buildings have been chosen for their symbolism. In fact, on the right, the Hartley Library, I was a student here in the early 1980s, and the Hartley Library was a library, and it was probably less than half the size it is now. In the 25 years or so that I was away, the Hartley Library more than doubled in size and more than halved the space used for book storage. It is now a learning space that still has traditional library facilities, but a great deal more. It's been redesigned. It has morphed as a building. The facade, the lovely red brick facade, still remains the same, but the inside of the library is entirely different from a generation ago. What's stored there, what goes on there, the way in which students use the library and learn in the library is enormously changed over that time, and I believe it will continue to change. The Life Sciences building on the left doesn't have large lecture theatres. It's designed with hugely flexible learning space for the students, but it also, of course, houses a large range of laboratories for teaching and learning and research. and lots of space for interdisciplinary learning, where we're bringing students together from different parts of the campus in interdisciplinary learning and in research. So it is, for me, an example of what the campus of the future is going to look more and more like. Interdisciplinary, mixed-use space, no large lecture theatres, but lots of flexible learning space, entirely wired up and entirely designed to add value to the learning experience of our students today and in the future. So the future, as far as I'm concerned, of course, is clicks, but it's clicks and bricks. I don't think this is going to herald the end of campus education, but I do think it will accelerate an existing evolution in campus-based learning. Thanks very much.
Experienced speaker coming in bang on time. Thank you, Don. So it gives us plenty of time, in fact, to ask questions. And I think Don's happy to take questions. Don't go. All right. We haven't got a second microphone, have we, to run around with?
I'll shout.
Shout.
Yeah, shout.
Are we asking folks to introduce themselves?
Alison, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Alison this morning. I'm the academic lead for flexible learning at the higher education category. And thank you very much indeed. My theme is very much what you've been talking about. As I conduct my work as the lead for flexible learning at the HEA, I tend to put it within the wider global context of employability, which is also looking for flexibility, of mobility, and that's the technology side of things, which is allowing flexibility not only of students of learning, but also within the workplace. And also the global context of 24/7, where people are going to be doing things throughout the 24-hour day, etc. So I'm really concurring exactly with what you've been saying, but putting those additional dimensions into the pot and really endorsing your vision. Just a comment, not a question.
Thank you. I might say that as a university, in common with a number of universities, we're of course expanding our global footprint. So we opened up permanent offices in Singapore last month. We now have a permanent research base in Singapore. Last year we opened our first international campus in Malaysia. We have a building, University of Southampton building, in the middle of a campus in China. So the 24/7 operation has some real meaning for a university like Southampton at the moment. We have people engaged in studying for University of Southampton degrees in a campus environment in at least 3 other countries in now 3 time zones.
Jonathan, I was just interested to know, given it's such a radical change, what kind of pushback you might be getting from academics on this? What sorts of things are they saying to you? More really of their concerns. I think there's a strong positive message, but I'm interested to hear what the feeling is here.
Yeah, I don't know if I could easily say there's pushback in the sense that generally the pushback is people will just ignore it, in my experience. I mean, where I would anticipate pushback is that if we progressively support and encourage, you might be better placed to answer this than I am, if we progressively support and encourage our staff to start to use IT in education, some will embrace it and have embraced it enthusiastically. Others are very reluctant and will continue to do the thing that they've done for 10, possibly 20 years or more. And increasingly that's not the kind of learning that our students are looking for. And where I'm expecting tension, and where some exists at the moment, is where we, for example, getting poor feedback from students about the quality of the teaching and learning, and a failure on the part of of an individual academic to embrace the change necessary, which almost always involves more interactive forms of learning, better use of IT in education. So I suppose it's passive resistance rather than active pushback that I'm saying. Hugh, do you want to comment? I mean, you're closer to the front line at this university, aren't you?
I could make. Yeah, I entirely agree with Don's analysis of that, but I would say the student experience goes two ways. That yes, there are those students who are looking for more flexibility, more different ways of approaching their learning. There are also some who are very, very conservative students as well, who if you say, right, we're going to go for the flipped classroom, we're going to get flipped MOOC or whatever, go and do the MOOC and then we'll come in and have a discussion. They get cross that you haven't given them their money's worth. You know, well, come on, you learn me. Yeah. So yeah, it works both ways. But yes, we get both angles, just as Don said.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just offer I just offer a slightly more controversial comment. One of the observations I would make is that a portion of our first year students come into the university having been coached to within an inch of their life in their sixth form. And a very hand-fed education. And then coming to a university in general is quite a radical experience. Being expected to take responsibility and discipline responsibility for their own learning is quite a shock to some students in their first few months at university. They are used to a particular style of learning. So I suppose a slightly more controversial comment, it would be good if we could get schools to start to embrace a bit more the use of IT enhanced education. So
Got a question from okay, who's going to go first?
I think Gail was first.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. Gabby, sorry, I couldn't read it. Sorry, my eyesight's poor.
I just wanted to ask, to what extent is it important for Southampton to be part of Future Learn? Does it make any difference as opposed to going it alone?
Does it make any difference? I think it makes a difference in terms of the fact that Future Learn have sweated a lot to create a platform to deliver MOOCs that we otherwise might have had to have done for ourselves. And speaking personally, that seemed to me to be the simplest argument for joining something like Future Learn. I mean, if Future Learn had not been available, I suspect there's enough enthusiasm and interest and technical know-how within the university that we would probably have done our own. We'd have done something, and not felt the need to join Future Learn. As there's a whole set of circumstances that lead you to make decisions. I spent some quality time with Martin Bean, and that was just sort of. He just assumed we would be joining, and that was the end of the discussion, really. So, I don't know we gave that a lot of thought, but I suspect the attraction was simply that it's convenient for us to join something like Future Learn.
And there's certainly a power of the number of people
Sure.
that we've got involved, but I don't know that we would have got if we just put our own hand up.
Yeah.
And says we're doing it.
If I can just follow on from there, I'm Helena Gillespie, I'm from UEA, and we're the proud owner of Future Learn's first MOOC, Secret Power Brands, and I have to say it's about since the Pro Vice Chancellor stood in my office and said, Helena, I've got a job for you.
I remember that one.
Yes, and once I picked myself up off the floor, they were surprised that we were going to do something so cutting edge. Actually, I'm really glad that we did it because I think if somebody had come to me a year ago and said, you're going to have to do open and distance learning, but you can do it with the Open University and pretty much all of the rest of the top 20, I think we'd have said, oh yes, that's probably the best way for us to make progress with this. And so, that for me has actually been key in the success of being able to move so quickly towards our goal of actually having up and MOOCs up and running. But just to come back to the point you were making earlier on about student expectations and so on, and a perceived mismatch between what we'd like to call dominant university as kind of a one thing, but for me, a MOOC is a way of delivering several things, and what we're expecting from the Secret Power brands and what we're expecting from preparing for uni are actually very, very different things, and you might get something completely different out of websites and oceanography. So it seems to me that one of the things that we need to make sure we're doing here is making sure that we're thinking about the diversity of MOOCs as opposed to just thinking as one thing.
No, that's a really important point. I think I have focused in my presentation. I didn't really mean to, but I have. I can see now on MOOCs as higher education vehicles. Whereas I think Hugh would be very quick to say our third MOOC based on an absolutely outstanding archaeological activity that we're engaged in excavating the Roman port of Portus. Now, to be really honest with you, I'm not expecting that to fit in the same pattern. But what Hugh would say is, we with no disrespect to anything, we might attract a grey, might attract an entirely different type of student into that MOOC. Students who've got a personal interest, or it's nothing to do with wanting self-advancement for career purposes or anything like that, but actually to do with their interests.
And coming back to your first point, actually, we're all going to learn a lot more about this if we do share.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges with Future Learn, is that some people are very, very willing to share, and other people are more worried about the kind of commercial.
Yes, there's a little bit of
it's
resistance
a
to
tension
sharing.
that we will feel, I think. But we will learn more if we do share, I think.
I think so.
To everybody's benefit.
Absolutely.
We'll share everything.
Mike's waving his arm around. I've also got one question from Twitter. I'll try and we want to
Don't
finish
worry
quite
about your
quickly.
timing.
Yes,
I go on all morning.
Mine will interesting, the whole area of brands. Some universities have a brand, and the university is the brand, and it doesn't matter which course they run, except the university. You pointed out the idea of taking things to a world leading. How do you see that playing out into the future? Will it end up with universities now open, just focusing on the things they're world leading? What about the areas that are not world leading?
No, it's a very good question. Of course, my answer to most questions about the future and MOOCs is I don't know. What I would say here is, I think I said, I meant to say, if I didn't, that we chose areas that would show off our brand the best. So it's still all about the University of Southampton. And my colleagues, I've got into trouble for doing this, but I can't think of a better example for the moment. Probably the University of Southampton is not going to compete well in Accounting 101. We actually teach accounting really well at this university, but I suspect other places around the world will be able to attract by their name students into that. The reason we've gone into these areas is we can both get our brand out there, the University of Southampton, and for something that people will probably want to sign up for, certainly after those experiences, if that's the case. So I think what we're trying to do is to project both the brand and the issue. I've certainly discussed with Hugh, and of course I'm hopelessly ambitious, But it's my view that and one of the things we've been particularly exploring is the idea of mini MOOCs, not a whole program. But if you wanted to know what the University of Southampton was like and what it was like to study here in a particular discipline area, why don't you just join our mini MOOC? And it's like a taster event. And my view is that we should try over a period of time to have any prospective student offer them the opportunity to see what it's like to learn at Southampton in any discipline area. So this is about accelerating the use of IT in all sorts of ways in what we do at the university. So I see no incompatibility between choosing our world-leading areas to project ourselves into a highly competitive market through FutureLearn, whilst at the same time, within the university, creating a whole series of mini MOOCs across the disciplines.
And at that point, I think we'll. I have one question from Twitter, which is about regulation, but we have a panel to follow later this morning, and maybe kind of regulation and the involvement of QAA and something might possibly come up in the panel. And Don is going to be on the panel as well. So thank you very much, Don. We now have a coffee break. Yes. Sure.
Thank you.
Right, to turn them off, press and hold. If there's, is there a light flashing on it?
Can I have a go with that?
I just turned it off.
Oh, well,
Do you want it on?
let me take it for a little walk.
It should be on now.
Where does it turn on then?
I think
That one's off.
if I can use one, I'll probably use that one.
Okay, it's turned off because it's got a red light to turn back on.
There's a boundary light here, so you actually don't need to have one.
Isn't that hooked up to this laptop for Skype? That's for the Skype. That's not going over the PA.
So it's this one.
That's the boundary light. That's for Skype.
So if I'm standing up, will that pick up, do you think?
It did pick up your
Is that a microphone?
Yeah.
No, not that one.
cool.
That's
That's
hooked up to that's the rocket mic. That's hooked up for the Skype or Hangouts or whatever.
Okay.
But that one will work. If not, just turn that one on and that should be fine.
Okay.
So it's not getting me into ISS.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Do you want to?
Refresh from coffee, we're back again.
Doesn't matter.
What are you trying to do?
The next talk is going to be from Simon Nelson, who is the CEO of, is that the right word?
It is.
Of FutureLearn. I have to confess that when we first started to go into this relationship with FutureLearn, the MOOCs are going to start in October, and there isn't a platform yet. We're going to build a platform in 6 months, really. I was quite kind of worried, but when we knew who was doing it, the team that Simon has led, we gained enormous confidence. I mean, these are the people that managed to make the iPlayer work across the whole of the UK and scale MP3 to or video to our computers. I have to say that. I thought right from the beginning, these are people who understand the business of scale. And when we started talking to them about how they were going to do it, we understood they can do scale. And indeed, they appear to be delivering as promised. So I'm going to hand over to Simon, and he will tell you a bit about the business of how FutureLearn has worked.
Thank you, Hugh. Yes, Simon Nelson. I'm now. It's now almost a year since I was summoned over the road from where I was normally doing business, which was in the MTV building in Hawley Crescent in Camden, to meet Martin Bean in the Open University, Vice Chancellor of the Open University, in the Open University building on Hawley Crescent. The acronym, the appalling acronym MOOC, was first described to me. A few weeks later, I'd agreed to set up this thing. And a few weeks later, we announced the launch of FutureLearn in mid-December last year. So it's been quite a journey since, but it's a privilege to be here today at the home of one of my favourite partners. For other partners in the room, you are as well. But I will say that Southampton and Don were among the, if not the earliest supporters of what became FutureLearn, and have been incredibly supportive and guided us along the way, and especially Hugh, working closely with him. And I cannot wait for the start of their first course on Monday. I'm going to give a presentation, 20-25 minutes. I hope in it I'm not going to teach a room of world-class learning technologists to suck eggs, but I probably will from time to time. Please forgive me if I do, and teach you, remind you of some of the basics, like the fact that FutureLearn's a platform for online learning. And we sort of put MOOCs within that. I don't say we're exclusively a MOOC platform, because I think MOOCs is such an early and emergent market that I think this thing could go in a number of different directions, but it's definitely an exciting start point for us. I suspect that this room knows what a MOOC is, but our own interpretation, large numbers of students, open to all, 2 to 6 hours study a week, 6 to 10 weeks duration, and a high degree of social interaction involved. We have, I hope, a pretty simple and clear vision of what we're trying to do. Inspiring learning for life through telling stories, provoking conversation, and celebrating progress. Of those sort of 3 points, the most controversial whenever I've spoken to academics or partners is always the first one, telling stories. But I therefore leave it in very deliberately because I think it provokes exactly the kind of conversation we should be having about how to use the platform of the web to deliver new forms of learning. And it's also a bias to my previous 15 years at the BBC, where I was certainly not, I wouldn't take all the credit that Hugh's just given me for the development of the iPlayer, but I was certainly heavily involved in that and the interactive web services for radio and TV. So we deliver through, hopefully, an expertise in distance and online learning, drawn from our founder, our owner, the Open University, but also that area of, sort of broadcast storytelling. A lot of my team have got that BBC background, but also I'm bringing in sort of digital startup people very grounded in the new social tools and technologies that we believe can really bring this thing to life. And a marriage of those 3 areas is always the easiest thing, but that for me is what FutureLearn is about, and that's what the sort of the beauty of our ownership structure and our relationship with the Open University potentially gives us. So I'm able to draw on world-class talent from the academic side of the Open University. Mike Sharple's my academic lead. I'm drawing on world-class experts like Simon Buckingham-Shum in the area of learning analytics. And as I say, my background, media, Martin Bean, my chairman, Vice Chancellor of the OU, education technology. So if we can get those sort of things working well together, and I think we have done so far, then I think we're onto something. Particularly if we can exploit these amazing relationships that we've been able to build up so far. So 26 partners, 23 UK, 3 international, and the latest to come on board, University of Auckland, Newcastle, and Liverpool, but an extremely powerful group of universities in my view, and I think increasingly we're starting to see some of the collaborative potential of this grouping. I'm very clear that with FutureLearn we're nothing without our partners, and actually we have to be really, really good at building a product and a platform for online learning, but also at working with these partnerships, because if we do that, then I do think there's very exciting innovations that are going to come out from the collective partnership. There are a whole range of different motivations, I think, that bring those partners within the FutureLearn family, but I think the potential for global reach is a key sort of common driver, but also that opportunity to experiment in a new MOOC landscape, and experiment in terms of online learning, online delivery of their existing expertise. I class these 5 broad motivations as some combination of each. I think powers most of our university partners. It's not only academic partners. We have 3 high-class content partners who we're working with, and our vision for these is to use them to augment the content, the courses that are coming out of the universities, but also potentially to co-create some of those courses, and to place the actual online learning at the heart of a broader online knowledge offer, drawing in the digital archives of, for example, the museum, the library, etc. And behind these there's a whole range of other potential partners: cultural, content, commercial who are interested in working with the university sector to bring these new forms of learning to life. I don't have the BBC up there, but it won't surprise you to know I've been working quite hard on them over the last year. Last week, no, 2 weeks ago, they announced the first collaboration with FutureLearn and its universities as part of its centenary of World War I commemorations. So we're working on the first potential courses to come out of there. And so not only cultural corporate bodies, first commercial corporate partner, British Telecom. And I'd say that my approach to British Telecom, as with those first three content partners, is about piloting different ways of working with the universities and then using what we learn from them to open up to a wider range of potential partners. So watch this space there. So we're up and running. Our first courses are out there at the moment. Course 4 launched this week. The Mind is Flat from the University of Warwick. And we'll be running 8 in total by the back end of this year. As I say, Web Science starts on Monday. I'm very much enjoying the experience of working through some of these courses. So we're not in here just to sort of copy, this emerging MOOC landscape. We do think we can bring something new. We think we can bring something fresh, something different to this area if we really exploit those partnerships with our universities and bring that open university and social web development together. So we're particularly excited about the idea of transforming the convenience and accessibility of learning by making it available at times of the day and on devices and in locations where traditionally people wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn. So we've heavily prioritized mobile learning. We've made sure that we've developed the whole FutureLearn platform in a responsive way so that it renders appropriately on small mobile phone device, a tablet, as well as on a desktop or laptop. And surprisingly, I think that already puts us a little ahead of the game of some of the existing providers out there, although I'm sure they're catching up very quickly. There's a lot further to go in here. I want to be providing offline access in some way, not least for myself. The metro system of London, of course, is the perfect environment to get through some of those 6-minute videos. Watch this space on there, and we're also intrigued by some of the other potential that native app environments could provide us. I want to emphasize we've launched in beta. We've done that very deliberately. I would say that I'm incredibly proud of the beta product we've put out there, but I'd say at the moment it's the foundations of what FutureLearn's going to become. It's not the end product. And in some ways I sort of think we maybe should always stay in beta, because I'm never getting rid of my development team. There's always going to be the next innovation to come. We're always going to be learning from what happened in the last month and hopefully iterating rapidly that product in order to get it better. We'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. But as I say, you can now go to FutureLearn. I'm hoping many to the second experience. So learners can just go on and join that course. as I say, I think we've got, the thing I asked my team to prioritise was the foundations, the core architecture. I remember at the BBC, I'm very proud of a huge amount of stuff that we built and developed, and the audiences we reached, the innovations we reached, and so on. But there were a few things that I just could never do well. One of them was mobile, and another one was social. And that's because I was building on a legacy system, a sort of Frankenstein technology platform that had started in 1997 with the BBC News site. And in fact, the original architect of that site was my lead technologist at the start of this project. Because the thing has managed to grow to go however many tens of millions, billions of pages or whatever, based on that same architecture that was designed at the beginning. But to then actually, turn that oil tanker to do social simply and well was almost impossible. So the priority for the team has been fewer bells and whistles, but get that functionality, get that architecture in place so that we can grow, we can build on it, etc. I think they've done that superbly. The sort of core architecture is one's to-do list with hopefully a clear representation of the course structure, how many weeks are, where you are in that cycle at the moment. You've got your steps underneath. You can watch an individual bit of video, read an article, join in a discussion, and once you've done that, you self-complete by marking something as complete, and that then tracks back to your to-do list. You can see what you've done, what you've still got to do, what's coming up next, etc. So again, a huge amount we're learning about this area from our first experiments with it, really. How does it feel if you've only ticked off 3/4 of week 1 and week 2's already begun? How do we communicate to the learner that that's sort of okay? Is it okay for the course structure? And then what counts as complete? These are very interesting questions for us. We've heavily prioritised, as I say, these aspects of social learning. We think that learning together is one of the key opportunities that the web offers to develop on where we're coming from. And I've been absolutely blown away by the first real learner reaction to these features. So I'll be honest with you, we put them out going, okay, at the moment they're not that sophisticated. There are basically long discussions. It's very hard to filter at the moment. We haven't got the opportunity for small group discussion. I promise you all of this is coming. We have all sorts of ways that we're going to be able to manage large amounts of social activity. We decided we're in beta, we want to get this out there. The reaction's been amazing. And the volume of take-up, the quantity and quality of discussion in these environments. Again, vindicating, I think, some of the early decisions we took to place the discussion at the heart of the content rather than send people off into different environments to discuss, to chat, etc. But if you go through one of our courses, then I think you really do find, and there's something about anyone who's been involved with a MOOC development, and I'm sure there's Amy from Edinburgh at the back there, who's been one of the UK pioneers in this area. I'm sure you'll agree there is a moment where you actually see real people in there talking, and it brings it to life in a way that's quite inspiring, really thrilling, and particularly on something so global. I mean, you get people introducing themselves. I'm from Peru, I'm from Korea, I'm from Nigeria, I'm from China. I want to learn this, I'm here for this. I work part-time doing this and have time in the evening. I'm trying to navigate around my 2-year-old toddler who's helping me do this. It's brilliant the way you see this come to life and the communities that build around it. And as I say, we're scratching the surface of what's possible here at the moment. Our first basic filtering techniques are in there. We're drawing on the principles from social media that we believe the core audience is very familiar with. So the ability to follow people who you're particularly interested in and be able to then filter your discussions by filter the social activity you view by the people you follow. I'll show you a couple of things that are coming soon as well in that area. And our first assessment tools are in place, and the key here is to try and use these as formative experiences, so try and develop learning, not just test it. And it's interesting, working with, bringing together those different cultures in my team. There have been times when, I'd say the sort of web development side has come at an issue like assessment and multiple choice quizzes and gone, how hard can that be? And then we've sort of brought in the pedagogic experts from the OU and gone, okay, we've got a bit to learn about this. And again, that sort of that fusion of those skills, it's challenging because we're trying to do this in a MOOC environment, in a free environment. So finding the right area to pitch this at is key. But we're also there. We know that we've got the brands of the Open University and all our partners behind us. So we want to make damn sure that what we're putting out there is quality. And I think in just something as basic as multiple choice quizzes at the moment, we have put a lot of thinking into it, into the ability, how many tries people get for an individual question, what happens when they get one right or wrong, making sure that we provide hints from the educator, send people back to the areas where they might be able to go over their learning again in order to get that right, track their progress through, and score appropriately. And again, these are our first weeks of this. We're still learning what works, what's appropriate, etc. But again, in all of these areas, we're just looking to pick them off and do them well, but appropriately for a MOOC space. So coming soon, and you can imagine my sort of day job is tied up with a roadmap of things we could do and making sure we prioritise those appropriately. But one of the things that's starting to come in now is little innovative test, assess in those kind of areas, and we've got other demands for example, audio in quizzes and audio testing and comparison and video, etc. And also there's sort of innovative HTML5 apps, etc., that we want to embed into some of our courses to enable us to really exploit the interactive potential of the medium. So to do some, whizzy, funkier stuff around content. Coming soon. Peer review and assessment. So peer review, we're going to be starting with, that's a heavy priority for us because again, we think that hits several sweet spots of where we believe the MOOC space has to be, and not least our social aspects of utilising the crowd. So these are, early designs for what's coming, and actually is going to be tested quite shortly. We are hoping, maybe with Southampton. Then some of those aspects of, actually utilising these crowds in slightly more sophisticated ways. So group discussions, again, that's an early priority. And then there are much more sort of ambitious and sophisticated ways that we could do this. Forms of jigsaw learning, argue graph, some of you will be familiar with those concepts. And we definitely, I have people like Mike Sharples just ready to unleash themselves on the tools we give them in order to try and innovate in these kind of areas. Filtering those discussions. One of the things that we found in our alpha test was that there was a person going around all the comments and replying to lots of them, just saying like. And he just dotted all around and kept saying like. We thought, oh, okay, maybe we need a like button. And it's true, because you go through and you do, you see these incredibly warm sort of responses or incredibly, clever responses, and you don't necessarily always want to reply to them. Just want to, hit like. And so the ability to like stuff, to filter stuff in that way, and experiment around how do you scale, how do you filter social activity. And critically, one of the things I'm really sort of it's really coming home to me. It already was there. You know, celebrating progress is a key part of our vision, but you know, trying to understand what a learner's targets are, what success means for them, moving beyond the sort of crude, you know, retention completion rates that are sort of, you know, the media is obsessed by, potentially correctly, but there's something more sophisticated going on in here. And if we design these courses in the right way, then, you know, some people are going to come in and get, you know, chunks of learning that actually we should celebrate, we should maybe reward them for. And we're trying to find interesting ways to sort of visualize and use a learner's data, play it back to them so that they can to improve their own experience and set their own targets. Data, I'd say, is the lifeblood of the Future Learn offer. Go back to the BBC again. You know, 15-year-old platform basically powering BBC, getting sophisticated data and analytics, never mind then reacting rapidly to it. Again, really, really difficult for a legacy business. Future Learn doesn't have that excuse, and has all of that opportunity. So we're putting heavy emphasis on what we can do here, and we just see the benefits for learners, for the educator themselves, for partners as a whole, and for Future Learn, the product and the company, as manifold and actually critical to our success. So helping learners to track progress, set targets, understand how they're doing. Educators, you know, if we get the right kind of dashboards in front of them, provide them with dynamic and powerful data, then they will, that will help to improve the courses we are making. For partners, there's no doubt that you know, this is an opportunity to reach new students and to reach out into parts of the world where the traditional physical university has not been able to. But also, all of them are interested in the research potential of this big learning data, and we're trying as a partnership to find the right ways to collaborate and to make those opportunities available. And then, of course, for Future Learn, you know, we have to be a learning operation. We have our first learners on the platform. What are they telling us? What questions are they asking? So I'll give you a few that are sort of exercising me at the moment. I will say, I don't think there's any... One of the things about, you know, this area is, I don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all solution to what a MOOC is. But I do think there's stuff we can learn from everything we're doing. So in the first few weeks, we have had a 10-week course start. We've had a 2-week course start and finish. We've had a 6-week and 8-week course. I'm very interested to see what we can learn about the different rates of progress through there. I spoke about that number of steps that people are doing per week. What's appropriate? What does it mean? You know, how do you structure a course in case the majority of people are only getting 3/4 of the way through an individual week of steps? I don't know, but these are the kind of things that I want to put in front of our educators, really, and get them playing around with and testing. Video characteristics and length. I was going through a course the other day and, you know, watched an incredibly stimulating 7-minute piece of video that then was confronted with an 11-minute piece of video, and just in my own head a trigger went, I just can't justify that time now. There's just something about understanding ideal durations, ideal sort of scheduling of a course, understanding the sort of rhythms and pattern of the learner. Again, no one-size-fits-all solution, but you can imagine the depth and quality of data that's going to be coming back course by course and across the whole piece. Marketing and scheduling courses. Scheduling is a word I've sort of used a lot, bringing it in from TV. I remember when I moved from BBC Radio to BBC TV, I was blown away by this engine they had of sort of planning and scheduling, planning, commissioning and scheduling courses. So they analysed the hell out of what they thought viewers would want. Then they commissioned and, you know, went over everything with a fine-tooth comb through a very long production process, etc. And then, in terms of knowing exactly who would be there at what time, what they would be interested in, what else they might be doing, you know, this was down to an art. Some would say they've actually replaced some of the art with science in doing that, but if you can get the right balance, it's amazingly effective. We're nowhere near that yet. And I think, again, as a partnership, as an operation, you know, I want to get much more of a dialogue with all of our partners about, you know, understanding what works here, what learner appetite is, what learners we're after, and then all of us learning how to market to them, you know, because there's a web science course starting on Monday. Does everyone who would be interested in that know that it's the early stages here, we're in beta? But you know what? That is a key discipline we all need to learn. And actually, it's not something that is traditionally, I think, in our makeup. Titling. I will make no comment, but if you go through our title list, you'll see some things that are really clear, do what they say on the tin, and really suck you in. You'll see others that maybe don't, are a bit more confusing, etc. We cannot just translate the traditional university sort of course titles, etc., into this environment. To be fair, I don't think anyone really is, but we need to get good at this. How open should we be? So this is one of the things that's in sort of my lifeblood, and the rest of the team is actually making things open, discoverable, shareable. But it's sort of like a paywall argument with a newspaper, you know. How much should you open up pre-registration so that you can really take the benefits of that, you know, discoverability that what the web can offer, but then encourage people or even force them to register in order to take part of the whole experience. I'm running out of time. Use of email, key marketing tool. We need to get really good at it. Learner expectations and targets, that's progression I've spoken about. And sort of from all of that, what are the right metrics to measure success or failure for this? Because I think it's a lot more sophisticated than some of the traditional ones out there in the market. First, demographics. Pretty balanced, pretty typical. I think Helen is going to give a bit more insight into some of the learners that she's had on the power of brands. So I'll just leave that up for a sec while you take your photo, and then I'll move on and end by with the only stats I'm sort of putting out there publicly at the moment. So we actually got 20,000 people in the first 24 hours, but I've just adapted it to say 25,000 people in the first day or so after launch, because it juxtaposes beautifully with something that my chairman said to me, which is that in its first year after foundation, the Open University had 25,000 students. And so I think in just over a day, FutureLearn registered 25,000 people from over 150 countries. I find that dead exciting as I do the whole FutureLearn proposition. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Simon, will you forgive me, but in order to keep on time, what we said we'd do is we move into the panel session, and you can direct questions to the panel.
Yes, I of course.
Yep, thank you. So, panelists, please. So I should say, of course, thank you very much to Simon. The tweet stream was going mad there. You were releasing
in a good way.
Yes, absolutely. With people letting the world know what you've said there. So that'll be interesting to follow up. So
there is a roving mic going around.
There is a roving mic going around. So I can put this down, can I?
Yes. There's a mic here as well.
So does that turn?
That's okay.
Yeah. And I think we won't go through any introductions because you know who we are, and we'll just go straight into questions. And I can see 1, 2, 3, 4. So can I start there, and we'll go around that way. It's Gabby, isn't it?
Thank you.
So could you just say your name again and who you are, just because Simon wasn't here earlier?
Tass, University of Bradford and University of Leicester. I just want to ask about the code of conduct for FutureLearn. On the website, there's some wonderful points in it. One of them is, I may engage in robust debate where appropriate to the learning experience, but I will not deliberately personally attack or offend others, and I will not spam other future learners and so on. But number 13 out of 13 is a little surprising to me. It says, as the future learn community's first language is English, I will always post contributions in English to enable all to understand, unless specifically requested to do otherwise. And I think this kind of goes against the trend we've seen in MOOCs elsewhere, where little language groups have been set up independently. So I'm just wondering, is this really going to be enforced, and how serious is Future Learn about this, and why, and all of that?
Okay, so when you read it out like that, it sounds a little more draconian than maybe the spirit of it is. But you know, it is an encouragement that at the moment Future Learn is, you know, an English language platform, and we don't believe we can deliver a good experience if we have multiple languages appearing in threads that, as I say, at the moment are not able to be as filtered as we'd like. Now, the ability to throw into small group discussions maybe and have individual language groups is a good one, in fact. And I promise you as well, we do not, you know, see our future as exclusively English language. You know, we definitely want to open to other languages, other cultures, both in terms of welcoming learners, but also potentially in course development in the future. For the moment, it's about providing a good experience to all of our learners, and we believe if we have multiple languages in there, we may struggle. But I might just look at the language on that one.
So Helena's just trying to get in there.
Because we're actually doing this at the moment, and so one of the great things about Secret Power Brands is that actually learner behaviour has been very good. I am not aware of anybody who has pressed the report button. You know, and part of that is just it's actually a really nice, supportive place to be on the Secret Power Brands, and if people are speaking in languages that not everybody understands, that begins to inhibit that feeling at the moment. So I kind of, you know, I completely take the point that actually, while we're in beta, actually that is helping with making Secret Power Brands feel like the right place, and it's actually not, especially the learners, because we have a lot, we have real global engagement. So we've got a problem at the moment.
I would recommend you look at the language of that, because Future Learn got some bad press on Twitter a few weeks ago because of that.
Right.
So I will do. I think. Do you want to say anything on this one? Okay. So should we go to the next question?
My name is Bernard Bugazzi. I'm a student at the University of Leicester, and I come from Rwanda. When you look at MOOC at the current stage, they are only the privilege of people who have access to the internet. And when you look at the statistics, you find that they are less than 50% of the world population. And when you go to countries like Rwanda, it's less than 10%. However, and I'm really very glad because the BBC joined, and the BBC has been providing open courses like English language courses, and many people who do not have access to the internet have been learning those courses, and really they have been making a difference to those people. Now, my question is, now we are partnering with the BBC. Is the BBC going to broadcast the Future Learn MOOCs so that we move from people who have only access to the internet and reach people in those places without access to the internet, even without access to electricity? Thank you.
Okay, so firstly, in terms of the BBC, I'd say we're collaborating on the development of some courses. I wouldn't describe them as a partner yet in the same way as the library or museum is. Certainly would like to get them there. In terms of broadening access and opening access, it won't surprise you to know I am a big believer in the power of mass media and broadcast media still to sort of open the funnel to then encourage people to go online and to exploit the potential of online. Actually, I do believe the BBC could do more in that area, and that actually I often think that people don't quite the opportunities of really using those mass media platforms, but providing the online back channel to really take people onto the next steps. I think there's a lot more that could be done with that across the media in general. So it's certainly part of my philosophy. It's certainly something I'd hope we could do, and I also hope that MOOCs and open online learning can be a powerful motivator for people to take their first steps online and really start to exploit the potential of it.
I can.
You can.
You asked those who don't have access to the internet, do we leave them behind? I certainly hope not. It isn't a problem I can solve at the moment, or in any other way than providing, making sure our services are as accessible as possible when people take their first steps, making sure they're accessible on mobiles rather than purely, desktops, I am open to discussions about what we can do to broaden access, certainly.
And Don.
Sorry, Don.
That's okay. I think, so first of all, I absolutely appreciate the point that you're making, and I think there's always been a digital divide. I mean, it's existed really in the internet age, but is closing. I was fortunate enough to visit India in the last year, and it's very clear to me that certainly in India, the mobile phone is revolutionising the lives of many people, and that they have almost made a technological leapfrog through access and availability to cheap access, genuine accessibility to mobile phones, and through that progressively access to the internet. Technology still to develop and so on, but all I'm really saying is I think the advance of technology will help us here. It will help countries like your country, like Rwanda, to make a leap forward of 10 or 20 years in one quick go once we get the technology sorted out. So I'm a bit more optimistic about what might be accessible to all in the future. But I think Simon's right to say solving one problem at a time. From his perspective, is we'd like you to keep solving the problems to get the platform right. I think the technology will advance, and then the platform will become more and more accessible to a much wider range of people. It's certainly the case in India that there's a clear understanding that mobile phone access will provide the type of access to MOOCs that many are looking for in a meaningful way in the very near future. So I'm a bit more optimistic that the digital divide that we all know exists will be closed faster than we imagine.
So,
Mike Wald, University of Southampton. I'd like to ask a question about the video player and video hosting you've gone for. I mean, given your background with the iPlayer and X, you talked about making changes quickly. I mean, how tied up in are you with this? Because, for a player not to even have a caption button in this day and age, it seems quite amazing.
We're not tied up with it. It is definitely one of our sort of priority roadmap issues. So we're on it. It's just a question of timing, and we have timing and prioritization. But a point very much taken. Yeah.
I don't think we're going to comment on that one, are we? Sue.
Sue White, University of Southampton. You've explained how the Future Learning team, tech team, have been very mobile, and the academics have been very mobile as well, very agile. So brain missing. Agile in terms of getting materials off the ground. However, the QAA have been kind of prowling around and saying, what what's all this about quality that's happening here, and how is quality going to be assured? Should this be something we're in charge of? Academics obviously will have self-respect in terms of the materials they put together. You've got your institutional reputation, but I'd be interested in your views as well.
Did you want to add?
I'm happy to start, but then Don maybe. Simply to say, from my point of view, we've had a number of conversations with the QAA. They've been incredibly supportive and positive, and actually, I don't foresee any problem at the time being with that. I actually think that they, as everyone else, are very interested in what this MOOC area is doing for higher education in general. But our relations so far have been extremely supportive and constructive.
I don't think organisations like QAA have any role in relation to the operation of MOOCs at this stage in their evolution, to be honest, and the further away they are, the better as far as I'm concerned, frankly. I could be more frank, but I won't. It may come to matter as universities. I mentioned, I think, the University of Central Lancashire, I don't even know what it's called. One of those universities that I don't really know the name of has already indicated that it will offer credit for MOOCs. And I guess it's at that point that the QAA will need to consider, in the context of that specific university, whether or not the learning experience warrants the type of credit that they're giving it. I would not want it anywhere near the MOOC platform or the Future Learn organisation, to be absolutely honest, particularly at this point in its evolution. That's a personal opinion, of course.
Can I add a one word to that one? I'd like to put in a one to that and say, yes, of course, when we do credit-bearing things, the QAA are interested in our what we're giving credit for. But I don't remember anyone ever going through my teaching notes to check what I am teaching and how I am teaching it. They're looking at my assessment methods and things like this, which are the bit on top. So I feel I absolutely support Don's statement. I'm very glad to hear him say it. It seems that this is not where the QAA should be, and I'm quite interested to see the extent to which they wish to be. I'm not quite sure why. Got a question there, and then Fiona.
Hi, Ray Williams, University of Portsmouth. I'd just like to go back to some of the issues on arising out of language. It's not a language issue. What we found in researching some of the early MOOCs, 2008-2010, was that one of the key things that was happening, and I think it's one of the key value adds of MOOCs, is that it provides different points of engagement. You come in through different doors, different points of engagement, whatever your metaphor, but it allows different people to come into the game. Yeah. And one of the things that happened in the early MOOCs, and I know getting a platform up and running in a short period of time in one language is enough to do. So I'm not advocating 1,000 languages immediately. But one of the things that came out of the early research in a number of different platforms was that different people are comfortable in coming into the strange MOOC environment in different ways. And one of the ways of doing that is to say, we have a discussion form in English. You want a Spanish one, Chinese one, whatever. That's fine. Press a button, start one. And that made a huge difference. So there was a lot of students who came in through different ways. And one of the ways of doing that was to say, either create your own platform, so do your Twitter feed, so you can do a whole lot of different things. But one of the ways that people did was to say, we would like a discussion forum to be able to start in whatever language you like.
Yep. And
that provides a pedagogical bridge, which is really important for maximizing value added MOOCs.
So just to say that sounds like a reinforcement of the idea that was suggested earlier, I'm noting it down as we speak as a good extension potentially of our small group discussion thinking.
Anyone else want to?
No.
Okay. Up to Fiona.
I'm Fiona Harvey and I work here at the University of Southampton. I'm also the Alt MOOC SIG chair. There's some questions from Twitter I just thought I should bring to your attention. There's just one, lots of them have been answered already. Somebody has asked, or Sam Ling has asked, if MOOCs are still with us in 10 years, what does uni classroom look like and how do we manage the transition?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I think universities are already managing a transition. I mentioned in my presentation this morning how our Hartley Library has undergone an extraordinary transition over a generation, and how our most recently built and designed building was designed for a quite different learning experience. We're currently planning another major student building in the centre of campus at the moment, and it's very likely that the learning space that we create there will be highly flexible and adaptable. So my sense is that that's already happening, and I suspect that if you went round the room, every major campus would have a similar story to tell about the evolution of campus design and the evolution of learning space. As I say, it's unlikely that we'll be building 500 and 600 student lecture theatres in the future, or many of them.
I think there's two aspects of this that I'm curious about in 10 years' time. One is who will be in the classroom from a teaching delivery point of view. Because I think one of the things all of the MOOC examples we've seen and what we're going to hear about more today is all very much giving new perspectives to using technology in education, and the extent to which some of the lecturers who are already on FutureLearn on their videos are gaining a new sense of their professional identity across social media, and not least of all, is I think going to have a really big impact. But I also think one of the opportunities that we have, and what we looked at today, the sort of idea of having MOOCs that maybe aren't mirroring academic courses at university level, but also lifelong learning. So in terms of who is in the classroom, that might be a completely different population, also different age groups. So I think from a perspective of learning technologists and professionals here today, that is what I'm very curious about, is who will actually be the content creators, the learning designers, the delivery platform makers of the future, and what can we do to contribute that. As Simon said, the data will tell us a lot of where we're going to go next.
Okay.
There was one here.
Okay, Michelle Boardman, formerly with SIDE, now the University of Derby Online Learning, and a former BBC Learning employee at the same time as I'm.
Hold a second and the microphone will arrive for you, Michelle.
Michelle Boardman, formerly part of SIDE, now the University of Derby Online Learning, and I was at the BBC at the time of iPlayer being launched. Don Beam in his presentation referred to how MOOCs can impact campus-based pedagogy with flipped learning. Considering widening participation with higher education, what opportunities do the panel think MOOCs offer to encourage people studying online to engage with education on campuses, libraries, museums or other physical locations?
Yes, please.
Actually, I've been involved in a campaign called Maths for Us, which is a campaign led by NIAS, and it's about basic math skills. And one of the things this campaign has done is also develop MOOCs and online learning, and they use UK Centres Online, sort of active in library spaces, other public spaces, offering access to the internet for those who don't have it at home or might need technical skills. And I think also Don's anecdote about India and mobile devices make a big difference here, because that's what we see a lot in rural areas in the UK as well. I've heard a really interesting experiment of running courses online when the weather was bad. So if you're living in an area that gets a lot of snow, let's say in northern Scotland, you might have actually a lot more access to campus online during the winter months than you would do otherwise. So I think there is a really key functionality of MOOCs here in terms of accessibility, equality of opportunity, but also I think for learners from different age groups and different regional locations to participate, and that might change the university experience in some ways. So I think I'm going to pass the mic on to you now.
No, not at all. I mean, the truth is we don't know. And I mentioned in my presentation that there are many who are engaging with MOOCs in this academic community who are doing so for social benefit reasons. And we've certainly identified this as part of our social mission. To reach out in many different ways. I think of widening participation rather more globally than I do just about encouraging young people from non-traditional backgrounds to come to university in the UK. And my sense is that we're going to have a bigger impact than that globally in terms of enabling people to engage with higher education from all around the world. But I think, my view is we should experiment with everything in these early stages, and that will remain my view for some time yet. I'm sure that's the view of FutureLearn. We have to experiment with everything to see what works and what takes a hold.
Any more questions? Roger.
Roger Emery from Solent University, Devon Road. Two-part question. You've talked a lot about the top 20 universities. Is FutureLearn being elitist at all? It's a cruel question. And will it be opening its doors to universities and maybe even further education colleges that aren't in that top 20 in the future? How will you join?
Okay, so I'd say with developing the FutureLearn partnership, this has been, as has been commented, a highly agile process and one that we've had to do very rapidly. So I had to decide, very early that how many partners we could comfortably accept and what was the right sort of kind of area to draw the line. There was no right way of doing that I could see beyond using league tables as an objective measure that would excuse me from any subjective judgment in order to do that. And so that's how I drew up the initial sort of membership criteria from a university point of view. So we've had some founder universities who have worked incredibly hard and, as one of the questioners pointed out, in an extremely agile way themselves to get these first courses up and running. It's not something that's set in stone, but for the moment, we still have a lot to learn as a partnership about where we're going. But I'd say not set in stone, but no immediate review of what we're doing at the moment. Don, did you want to add anything? Or?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I could add. In the end, I think learners will take excellence from wherever they can find it, and the issue will ultimately become: are learners prevented from accessing material from your university, let's say, because you're not part of FutureLearn? My sense is, again, in the future, as the technology evolves, it may become more or less relevant to be part of FutureLearn or Coursera or any of the currently organised vehicles for delivering MOOCs. I actually don't have a feel for that, but my sense is learners won't care that much whether it's part of X platform or Y platform. Learners will go looking for what they're interested in and what they want, and that can come from any source, it seems to me, as it can and does now.
I just want to make a small point on that question, is that I think regardless of platform, there's, I think, certainly a real sense of the potential of the MOOC sort of model for FE and skills delivery, particularly for adult learning and work-based learning. And I think even in staff development terms, there is a lot of opportunity here. And I think one of the sort of ways in which the MOOC might well be active is to try and organise more non-traditional style MOOCs and experimenting with the business models and opportunities for running things in different types of ways. So I think there's certainly a lot of potential there, and FE is an area where there's a lot of interest in that as well. So now I'm quite excited about what might happen there.
I think that's about the right, perfect timing actually to stop this session. And can I say thank you very much to the panellists.
Thank you.
There is no break now, is there, Hugh? We're going to go straight into one more presentation. Great.
Can I have the
whiteboard?
Yeah, can I have it where everybody can see it?
I'm going to take the whiteboard to where everyone can see it, am I?
Would you mind that if you just sort of stick it in the middle, because I'm going to write on it.
It's clear about right, Helena.
Yeah, that looks good.
So while Helena's getting set up, Helena Gillespie from UEA. Sorry, Helena Gillespie from UEA.
Yes, I'll get it for you just a second.
So Helena's my kind of opposite number. She was the person that, as she said earlier, got fingered by her vice chancellor when UEA joined FutureLearn, and is possibly looking slightly less stressed and rather more relaxed than I am looking at the moment, because they have just completed their first MOOC and we just start ours in a few days' time. So what makes good is something perhaps that she is more qualified than anyone else in the FutureLearn consortium to talk about at the moment.
Yes, thank you. Actually, can I just check, is that audio working okay? Yeah, you're good. Okay. Yes, the difficulty often in doing this at a conference is that you don't know what's going to come before, and that one sits through the first few sessions and gradually crossing things off the list of what one was going to say, because somebody's already said them. But also, it does give me an opportunity to sort of sharpen up what I'm going to do in terms of what I think you might actually want to know. And I'm just getting a sense at the moment that actually what you'd quite like to know from me representing UEA is how it's been for me, if you like, and what data we've got. So what I kind of find quite helpful to do initially is for you to just have a couple of minutes to think about what data you'd like me to talk about, and then I will try my best to answer your questions. So if you could just think about that for a moment, while I introduce myself properly, that would be really helpful. If you can just sort of jot down some ideas, like have you got any data on this, or have you got any data on that? And if I haven't, I'll say, and I might have it. So I should introduce myself properly. I'm Helena Gillespie. I'm the MOOC project lead for UEA. I'm also Associate Dean for Learning, Teaching and Quality in the Faculty of Social Sciences, and I'm a lecturer in education specialising in learning technology. And actually, the thing that qualifies me to be the MOOC project lead is kind of those other two hats, because I specialise in learning technology, in teaching about learning technology, but I also have an organisational managerial role within the university. And it was the fact that I wore those two hats that meant the Praised Vice Chancellor came and knocked on my door just before I was off on my Christmas holidays last year and said, just the woman, I've got a job for you. And after I'd sort of picked myself up off the floor in surprise that we were going to do something quite so incredibly cutting edge, one of the things that I said was, yes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to find out as much as I can. And when people say, okay, what's UEA's motivation? Okay,
Yeah, we think this might be good marketing. We think this is good forward planning. It could be interesting for us educationally, but we are in this to find out as much as we can. For me, that's kind of the major motivation. And so you've had a couple of minutes now. I just wondered if anybody would now like to tell me if there's anything that they would like to, any questions they would like me to try to answer with the data that I have in my head and some of the data that I've brought with me. Is there anything specific that you would like me to concentrate on?
Have you converted any attendance? What's the right word?
Yeah.
Any people that have taken part in the MOOCs into
Okay. So you really want to know about what we're marketing? Okay. I think I can probably answer that to some extent. Okay. So you want some data about that sort of? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
What were the motivations of the people who signed up for your MOOCs?
Okay. You want me to get inside the Vice Chancellor's head? Okay.
The people. No. The participants.
Oh, I can definitely.
What were the students, the learners?
Okay. I know we're supposed to call them participants, but no motivation. Okay. I've got quite a bit to say about that because I'm really interested in it.
What the impact of doing the course of the learners?
Okay, so what are they getting out of it? Okay, so motivation and the learner outcomes. Okay.
Interested in the experience of the educators that are involved in terms of design, development and delivery. What challenges do they have to
I can sort of talk anecdotally about that. I don't have survey data about that, but I can talk anecdotally about that.
Are there hotspots in learner activity? So there's a whole landscape of the things that have made up the MOOC. Where are the hotspots?
Yeah, like the idea of hotspots.
From a project management perspective, what's the ideal MOOC team? And so then how does that translate into for costs?
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about costs actually. So
I have this image of you, with a cave leading the MOOC team and who are your superhumans beside you.
Yeah, and do you know what? Just to say something about that. The only thing that has made it happen is the willingness of everybody in this team, including very significantly people at FutureLearn, to behave like sensible, rational, reasonable human beings under the most enormous pressure. And I should say that while you're in the room, really, because I'm talking about. I'm talking about Matthew and Matt in particular, but also Dharmesh and Roli and the other people who have, but the MOOC team is really important. So I will talk about the MOOC team, and I can talk a little bit about the costs and about some fluff around that as well. I've filled my page up, so I better start talking and answering your questions, and then if I run out of time, then you can buttonhole me later, and I'm happy to share the things that I've got. So I started off by planning this talk around some questions, okay? So let's address the first question with maybe what we know about MOOC learners, and we might wrap up some of it. So your question was, are we converting this to sign-ups? My answer is it's too soon to say. We're in week 4. We're running a 10-week MOOC. And in any case, I don't think that's what we were trying to do with the secret power of brands. What we were trying to do with the secret power of brands was to see how global we could make this. Now, the great thing about the secret power of brands was that the kind of the medium is the message for the secret power of brands, in that brands are a global phenomenon, and actually the richness of what's happened on the MOOC has been supported by the global nature of the learners. And I was actually really very excited at 5:30 on the morning of the 14th of October when I woke up. I actually woke up, and this is one of those kind of moments. it went live at 1 in the morning on the 14th, and I actually woke up at that moment. I thought, no, I'm not going to look. I'm not going to look. Otherwise, you know, it's this, you know, divorce pending. But I woke up and I looked, and it was just like a magic moment, because there were people already on there, real live students on there from all over the world, in time zones kind of ahead of us and so on. And so what we were trying to do with brands was to see how global we could make this. Well, here's your answer. So all the bits coloured in blue have people have people registered on the Secret Power of Brands. Looks like we're not touching Greenland at the moment, and our African reach is restricted. But pretty much everywhere else is coloured in. I'll be able to answer your question better once we finish with our next MOOC, which is preparing for uni. Apart from thinking that preparing students for university is very important, and our Vice-Chancellor was recently saying quite a bit about that in the Times Higher, and how we should get better at it. One of the things that we're trying to do with preparing for uni is to use it as a marketing tool. And so I think probably in 6 months' time, I will be able to tell you whether we think that preparing for uni has actually impacted on undergraduate bums on seats. So it's sort of different kind of horses for courses. I'm going to go on and actually answer the next question as well with the same slide, because I've got another diagram here, and I'm not sure that you can read this as clearly as I'd hoped you would. So forgive me if I just read this to you, and you can have this. Obviously, we'll publish these slides. So this data comes from the pre-course survey. I've got more data than I had time to deal with at the moment. So what is the major motivation for what our learners thought they wanted to get out of the course? And the first thing is that they wanted to learn new things, which I guess you can take as a kind of given. And that's kind of almost 100% of them said they wanted to learn new things. So that's good. And then we've got a kind of group of things which come in sort of around the 50% mark. So about half of the people who responded to the pre-course survey, about half of those said that these were significant factors. So they wanted to try out FutureLearn or MOOCs, okay? And I don't underestimate the power of nosiness, okay? We're hoping to draw in and make use of some of that. But this comes back to I'm rapidly turning into an amateur internet sociologist. I'm becoming very interested in the way that people behave online. And I read a really interesting article recently saying that basically lurking is okay. That we have this kind of thing that we say, oh, MOOC, the completion rates, they're not so good. But actually, I say, look, forget about it. It's not face-to-face. That's not the point. Actually, lurking on a MOOC is a perfectly sensible and valid thing to do. And so if you're out there lurking on our MOOC, okay, and I will be lurking on your MOOC, I may now be joining in. Everybody in the FutureLearn community, I am convinced, is lurking on everybody else's MOOC.
Yep.
But so I'm validating that for you. So that's okay. Okay.
Students are there.
Yeah, high levels of learner engagement, but I'm saying lurking's okay. But this was an interesting one. This is where it got interesting for me. That's the next one. So people who wanted to add a fresh perspective to their current work. Now that is really interesting for me. So half the people are coming along, bringing something they know about this topic already, and wanting to kind of augment it using our MOOC. So for me, that's really important. And then we've also got things like try out learning online, improve career prospects, learn flexibly, supplement existing studies interaction, and find out more about university. Actually, comes in less than 10% of our people who responded to this, and there were thousands who responded to this, wanted to find out more about university. I'm hoping that when we come to do preparing for uni, and we have the same stats for preparing for uni, we all have different responses. And that's where things start to get interesting, because that's when we can start to take this kind of thing, this holistic thing we're kind of calling MOOCs at the moment, and sort of channel it down the channels that we want it to channel down. Okay, so what's the educator experience? I don't know if I've got any data on that. Let me go back to my first slide and see if there's a question that kind of matches that. I'll tell you what I'll do. Next slide. I'm going to roll that up with answering the next question. With a question at the bottom, which is sort of relating to costs. We've just entered what I'm calling at UEA MOOC Phase 2. Okay, MOOC Phase 1 was actually just getting to the point where we launched a course, okay? And the qualification for joining in with MOOC Phase 1 was no closed doors, okay? So we didn't try at any point during the first phase to deal with anybody who wasn't completely bought in and enthusiastic about it. Because frankly, it was hard enough work as it was, just trying to understand everything and do everything and make the whole project work without having to deal with people's resistance. It's not that I want to exclude academic colleagues. We can't deal with them. We couldn't deal with them in that first phase. Phase 2 at the moment is the do it and find out as much as you can about why it might be useful phase. And then when we get to phase 3, which is begin to target what we do more closely, then I might get to the point where I have to knock on some of those doors that maybe are not so subscribed to us. And we talked already about, where areas in which universities are world class. Are we going to MOOC in those areas? So for UEA, that would be creative writing, American studies, environmental, and so on. And we're not MOOCing in those areas at the moment. Okay, but I may need to go and knock on some of those doors. And I don't know whether they're going to be open or closed. But that's really when I'm going to have to do that. But I guess the thing with the educator experience is that it has been a significant learning curve, because you sort of have to forget almost everything that you know about how you teach and start from basics. Because you're dealing not just with a different media, but a different sort of learner, and different sorts of learning resources and different tools and so on. And so people have to be kind of comfortable with that. And they also have to be comfortable with not knowing and being a bit unsure and it feeling a bit dangerous. And it did in early October, it felt really dangerous. Mm-hmm. But it's okay now, because it's running and it's fine and we're getting great piece of feedback, and so that's okay. But I did feel like I took a risk at the time. I'm going to jump now down to the ideal MOOC team. Okay, so our MOOC team goes me and Simon Lancaster, who's a national team, so very tech savvy. Some of you might already know Simon. And he describes himself as my right-hand man, and I think it's more of a kind of partnership. So we're sort of leading the project. We report directly to the Pro-Vice Chancellor, and within our team we have a group of about 8 academics who are MOOCing or preparing to MOOC. Oh yes, it is a verb. I think we've definitely verbed that one. So we've got our group, and then also in that team we have a learning technologist, and we also have somebody from the library, because I don't know whether you know, but FutureLearn have a group of FutureLearn librarians have set themselves up as a little group. Yeah. And they're talking about the implications of this for learning resources, which is really interesting. And so that's our group. And then also we have the person I described as UEA's man who can, which is we call him our course content creator, okay? And he's the person who does the day-to-day stuff. And he's called Ross, and he's marvellous for many reasons, but mostly because he's really low maintenance. You say, Ross, can you just go and do something? He just goes and does it. And for that reason, we respect him and we love him. So we have the kind of management, and then we have the academics, and then I guess we have some administrative people as well. But what we do is we sit around the table once a month. And I think the sitting around the table once a month is actually very important. We have an online area where we share things and all of that kind of stuff as well. But actually we sit around the table once a month and we just say, how is it going for you? And that's how we managed to stay sane. Because it is a very, very steep learning curve. I'm going to move on to costs now. And I've deliberately got this picture here because this is not a snip from our website. This is a snip from the website of Wolf Olins, who are a large brand management company. Okay, they've done some big stuff. They did Macmillan, they did the Olympics, and they've got a really big reputation. And this is Professor Robert Jones. He's our lead educator. And the great thing about Robert Jones is he works for Wolf Olins and he works for UEA. And what that enabled us to do was to put those two things together, to harness the power and the resource of Wolf Olins and what we can do at UEA in terms of education and bring those two things together. And there is no conflict of interest there. There is power in higher education in making these collaborations. MOOCs give us the power to do that collaboration. I'm not really a fan of saying, oh, well, it's real world higher education, because I don't like the idea that universities are not the real world. I'm very kind of allergic to that idea. But what it does do is it gives us that opportunity to really kind of link up in very demonstrable ways with other places. The other plans we've got, we're linking up with other companies, we're linking up with subject associations, we head to fantastic, and there's people knocking on the door saying, oh, I can't believe we've done this, and everybody starts congratulating one another. It was kind of a bit cathartic. Anyway, we all got very excited about that point, okay? And then, understandably, with MOOCs, the amount of traffic has kind of leveled down, okay? But what we do see here is a spike, Okay, and that's where Robert sent his first email. Okay, so we do know, so you can take this, we do know that emails generate traffic to the site. So we've started doing 2. The other thing Robert's doing is he's doing little video messages. That doesn't mean everybody has to do that. But because Robert spends his life going interesting places, so he's done one for me now. Here I am in New York, here I am in Copenhagen. It's just quite interesting for him to do that. Actually, we do find the video messages are really good at creating educated presence, where educated presence doesn't really exist. But what we do know is that, we have this kind of pattern, which is quite a lot of engagement going on in terms of learners, and then it drops off a bit in the night because we don't have so many people from those time zones. Okay, and then it picks up, and if we send an email, we get a spike. Okay, going forward with this data, we are still maintaining it into week 4. Okay, so we're not seeing, although we've seen significant drop-off from day 1, as you would expect, we're not seeing significant drop-off going forward. Okay, and we've changed pace on the MOOC now, and they're doing what they're doing this week. They've got to do something creative. They've got to make something. Okay, and so that's kind of quite interesting. The last thing I just want to add in, because it's something that I'm interested in about the learners. I don't know how many of you know Clay Shirky's book, Cognitive Surplus. I think I love it. I just love it. It's one of those things I just sit there and think, and I go, yes, of course you're right about this. So I just wanted, as sort of finishing, just sort of share a little bit of Clay Shirky's ideas. And this is really in terms of learner motivations and why MOOCs are great. So he's got this idea that there is a spectrum of collaboration. So for those of you who don't know, cognitive surplus is the word that Clay Shirky applies to the 1 trillion hours per year he estimates that the global internet-connected population have at their disposal. So it's not time that they're working or whatever. So there are 1 trillion hours a year that are out there for us to do something with. And he's terribly keen that we should do something collaborative and positive with those. And he thinks that there are basically 4 points on the sharing spectrum. Okay, now the first aspect of it is personal sharing. Okay, and this is sharing that doesn't really matter whether it has an audience. It's just something that I've done. And his favourite example of that is the Can I Have a Cheeseburger website. If you're familiar with lolcats, okay, so cute pictures of cats with badly spelled captions. Okay, people post them and then they get onto Facebook. Okay, and some people love them and some people hate them. And it doesn't really matter if anybody else doesn't see your lolcat. Okay, you just kind of feel satisfied in doing it yourself. And there's no necessary intrinsic value in that, but that's the sort of personal sharing. Okay, and then there's what he calls communal sharing. Okay, and he describes that as sharing to meet the needs of the people in the group. So got websites like meetup.com, where the benefit is definitely for the group, but it's only for the people in the group. Okay. The third sort is public sharing, which is where things are created by a group, but they have benefit to lots of people. And his example of that is the people who created the programming language Apache. So the group do it, but it has wider public benefit. Whereas for here, the benefit is just within the group, and here, the benefit. And then the kind of, the most valuable sort of sharing as far as he's concerned is civic sharing. And that sort of brings together all of these things. And that's where a group of people do something, which then has wider benefit for everybody. So a really good example of that is Ushahidi, which is the website that was created by people trying to globally, geographically map events. It started off in disputed elections in Kenya, but it's used for all sorts of things now. And that's where the benefit of something that a group of people have done that's internet enabled actually benefits everybody. And my question to you, just as I finish really, is where do we put MOOC participants on this scale? Is this just something that people are doing for themselves or for the group? Is there a wider benefit? I would really like to think that actually, that if we get really, really good at this, what we can do is we can actually MOOCs can become a form of civic sharing, where actually what happens on MOOCs is that the global understanding and knowledge and interest and engagement is actually fostered through this kind of medium. And then I think maybe, in terms of my own perspective, we will have achieved our MOOC aims. Thank you very much.
I think that's going to get a stream of questions. I can think of quite a few. There's even been some back chat to questions going on. Bearing in mind that it is lunch soon, let's not go for too many questions, but let's take a few. Yeah.
So my question is my name is Jen. I'm from University of Leicester. Thank you for the presentation. My question is for different types of sharing. So would you probably, I don't know, reason sometimes depending on the learner's level, because learning is a journey anyway.
Yeah.
MOOC learners are at various levels.
Yes.
Okay, MOOC learners are at various levels of, let's say, mastery of the materials. And less confident learners might tend to be personal, and they move progressively toward the civic learning.
Yeah.
So, would you agree that MOOC learners would be scattered in all those forms?
I think at the moment they are. But I think it would be useful for us to keep our eyes on the prize, which is here. But what I don't want to do is to say that MOOC learners ought to behave in a particular way, because, as I said before, I think we can endorse all sorts of learning behaviours that we wouldn't necessarily endorse in a face-to-face classroom in the MOOC environment. And that's one of the things that we're learning. So if people are working in this space where it's kind of introspective, then as a MOOC educator, I endorse that wholeheartedly. And I hope that eventually we'll be more
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi there, Matt Jenner from University College London. The chart behind you, seemingly, you sent out an email and you got a spike of activity. You did it right in the middle of two low spots. Was that intentional? Because obviously it drops and then it comes back up again.
No, planned. No. So so we email Friday and we email Sunday, Monday. It kind of depends, because what we try to pick up in the emails also is we try to bring in kind of topics and things that happen during the week. So if there's something significant that's happened, we might try to bring the email a bit further forward to still catch the news story. So we're still developing our practice around emails. I mean, I've always said that when I get a moment, I'm going to write a book about why email is like terrible and the worst thing to do. But actually, it seems to me that in this case, email actually is doing something particular for us. So no, not planned.
I wanted to ask a question as well. I was wondering, you've been the first person to speak today who's really had a sort of, nitty-gritty, hands dirty perspective on this. So if you, many here in the room will have been on a MOOC, but maybe not been in your position of actually having one of those great documents. I think that's what I most want to see, really, the how to run a course and how long it takes document. But what is your kind of the best bit and the worst bit? Sort of, I was thinking a more personal reflection before we break for lunch. Sort of, what's the best? What's the worst?
Okay, so what's the worst has undoubtedly been the stuff that I don't find very interesting, which is about contracts and budgets. And I've often said, whatever job you give me in the university, for God's sake, give me a budget, because I will just spend it. So that has been difficult, but it's not just been difficult because I don't enjoy it. It's actually been difficult because this is not like anything else we've done before. And the university kept scratching its head and saying, well, we don't do things like this. This is not how we do things. It doesn't fit within our... But there was a magic moment that happened, and it was just after Branch launched. And I don't know what happened in the Vice-Chancellor's office that morning, but somebody showed something, and somebody said something to somebody, and suddenly everybody couldn't be more helpful. You know, it was like they reached the magic moment where suddenly somebody went, oh my God, look what we've done. That's fantastic. And suddenly everybody wants to be helpful. And so that is getting easier. But I'm never ever going to enjoy the budgeting thing. And I'm never ever going to enjoy the contractual because it just doesn't engage me. What I'm actually really interested in is the people. And so that's my best thing. My best thing, and the real magic moment was that first day when you could actually really, really see it live. And I actually thought, do you know what, if UEA hadn't pushed this and done that, if we hadn't done those ads and put those things in, and if Robert and his team at Wolf Collins hadn't, you know, really pushed the envelope to try and get all of this done, we wouldn't have all of these people doing this. And they were really happy to be there. And a lot of them were actually posting, hi, you know, here I am from Ecuador, I'm really happy to be here. And I wanted to message every single one of them and go, oh, I'm really happy that you're here, but you know, like, I had students to teach and stuff. So yeah, that's the kind of my highest.
Okay, thank you. So I think we should give Helena a big round of thanks for the enormous.
Smooth example of face-to-face communication.
Okay, it's lunch, and we're back in just under an hour.